Welcome to the Mindful Eating Project event. Before I move forward, I just want to say thank you for coming. I was just talking to Laura a few moments ago, and I was saying how we tried to bring these topics to the community about 20 years ago, and it was very much shunned, unaccepted, and the message was, why are you talking about this? So these are topics that are difficult to discuss, so appreciate that we're bringing it to the forefront and hopefully freeing ourselves from these and being able to talk about eating disorders, poor relationships with food, and so on. So today we're going to explore and unpack the complexities of binge eating and the diet binge cycle. But before we do that, we would like to share a personal story from a community member who would like to remain anonymous. This story offers a heartfelt glimpse into their journey and into the challenges that they faced. Names in this testimony have been changed for confidentiality. Adele Jamal, committee member, will read it to us.
My story. The truth is, I have many moments I could share, but today I want to offer the ones that shaped me the most. I'm a regular Syrian girl. Chances are many of you here know me. Just understand, I'm not so different from you. It all began in high school. I didn't feel like I fit in, so I pulled away. I became quiet, distant, focused only on my grades and my body. My grades went up and I faded into the background. Unbeknownst to me, my parents were receiving phone calls from teachers, from concerned community members. They were trying to help me in the only way they knew how, making arrangements for me to get better. At 16, I didn't have much say. I went where I was told, I ate what I was given, I gained the weight they wanted me to gain, but inside I was still alone, still struggling. No one ever asked why. Years passed, then COVID hit. It became clear that the healing that had taken place only 3 years ago addressed only the physical parts of the restriction. The why that was never asked was silently destroying me. I was 19 and I looked sick again. Though I couldn't see it at the time, the tension in my house was unbearable. The silence with my parents deafening. My home didn't feel like a home anymore. I felt like a visitor. I escaped to Brooklyn most weeks, desperate to get away. I became unreliable, short-tempered, irresponsible, and selfish. I got fired from my internship. Why? Because my workouts took priority, and afterward I was too weak to even make it out in the heat. I was falling apart. Rock bottom was not far. I remember laying on the couch in Jersey, crying to my mom. What does happiness feel like? I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed or truly smiled. That was the first crack, the first time I saw something might actually be wrong. A week or two later, my birthday weekend, I made myself dinner. Then I noticed people walking into our house. I thought maybe they're here to celebrate. They weren't. It was an intervention. My closest people sat around me, each one expressing how scared they were. In the middle of them all was a stranger, a man I didn't recognize. That man, John, would become one of the most important people in my life. That night could have gone two ways. Thankfully, I was broken enough to say yes to help. I didn't trust many people, but somehow I trusted him. I couldn't involve my parents. Our relationship was too fragile. But John saw me. He respected me, and he treated me like an adult. And slowly, he helped rebuild what was broken, not just inside me, but between me and my parents. He taught them how to support me. He taught me how to set boundaries, and I began to learn who I really was. This wasn't overnight. John didn't treat me like a sick girl. We focused on healing my mind, and eventually my body followed. For a long time, I was numb. I didn't believe anything was wrong, but once I got a taste of what better felt like, I couldn't ignore it. It wasn't easy. There was panic, fear, anxiety, but I showed up to every appointment. I spoke up when I wasn't ready to move forward. I began to recover. But recovery isn't a straight line. Soon after, I started binge eating. At first, no one thought much of it. She probably just forgot what food tastes like, they said. But it got worse. I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I felt depressed. Eventually, John and I realized that this was my version of getting high. That feeling right before the binge, it felt euphoric. The difference is you can't quit food. It's not like other substances. You can't just remove it from your life. I struggled with that for months. I gained weight. I hated how I looked. But with the support from my therapist, my psychiatrist, and John, I started to recover. One night, binge-free turned into 2, then a week, and then more. Am I completely healed? Hell no. I still binge sometimes, maybe once every few weeks. But now, I know how to move forward. Sometimes there's no clear trigger, but I've learned you have the power to change, and once you stop blaming everyone and everything else, you're left with you. It's you versus you. We live in a world surrounded by food and in a community that's both loving and intense. Sometimes it feels like you have to choose, be happy with yourself or be accepted by others, but you can have both. Today, I'm a social, vibrant, happy girl in the community, and I wouldn't trade my story for anything. Do I still have moments when I want to change my body? Absolutely, that's normal. But what matters is what you do with those feelings. They can define your life or they can just be feelings, and you get to choose.
Usually, like any kind of addiction, it's emotional issues that are unaddressed. Sometimes we overeat, sometimes we undereat, but what's really inside is what we want to really focus on. It's not about the way we look on the outside, but how we feel on the inside. Now I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Alexa Conason. She wrote The Diet-Free Revolution that you saw in the front. She is a clinical psychologist and the author of The Diet-Free Revolution. She'll be guiding us through the intricacies of binge eating, the impact of diet binge cycle, and practical steps we can take toward healing. Next, we'll hear from Laura Shama, who will share her expertise and insights on navigating recovery and fostering a healthier relationship with food. Thank you all for being here and for your commitment to understanding and supporting each other. Now let's get started. Doctor.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So I'm Dr. Alexis Conason. I'm a clinical psychologist. My practice is in Manhattan, and I am also a certified eating disorder specialist and, as you've heard a few times now, the author of The Diet-Free Revolution. I'm really excited that everyone gets a copy of the book. I hope that you enjoy it. And it really rings true how much has changed over the past 20 years, as Lisa was saying. Like, I initially actually had the idea to write this book about 20 years ago, and it was every publisher I went to, every agent that I went to said, you know, how can you write a book about issues with food and not tell people that they're going to lose weight? If you can just tell people that they'll lose weight at the end, we can publish it. And so much changed, you know, over the past, 2 decades, where there's been much more acceptance and discussion in the mainstream culture about issues around binge eating, eating disorder, recovery, as well as body acceptance. So I'm really grateful that the landscape has changed, and I think we still have a long ways to go, especially with what we've seen over the past year or two with the recent discussions around kind of what people are terming the Ozempic era and the renewed emphasis on thinness and weight loss. So today I'm going to talk about unpacking binge eating and the diet binge cycle. So to start off, I'm going to just kind of use the time at the beginning of the talk today to share some definitions so that we're all on the same page, and then I'm hoping that a lot of the event today will be kind of discussion based and questions and answers, so we can be more targeted and specific to what you all are interested in. Binge eating is defined by the DSM, which is the book that therapists and psychiatrists use to diagnose people, as eating within an unusually short period of time. So within any 2-hour time period is generally what's used, an unusually large amount of food. And it's typically associated with loss of control around your eating and some kind of feelings of distress. So distress might be things like feeling guilt around your eating, feeling shame, embarrassed by what you're eating, and then physical distress as well, eating unusually fast or eating until you're unusually full. And then, if we want to get into the criteria around binge eating disorder, there's, some more specific things, including like frequency and duration. But one thing I really want to emphasize is that whether or not you meet diagnostic criteria for binge eating disorder, if you are struggling with your relationship with food, it definitely makes sense to seek out help. And I get a lot of calls from people who say, I'm not sure if I have an eating disorder or not. I don't meet all the criteria. And I usually say, if you're making this phone call, let's meet and let's chat, because there's something going on. And to be honest, most people in my practice don't necessarily meet criteria for an eating disorder. But if there is distress around your eating, we deserve better than that. We can live a fuller life. So I want to talk a little bit about the diet binge cycle, which is really key to binge eating, because oftentimes it's not just the binge eating. And when people are struggling with binge eating, that's usually what people identify as the problem. So that's what is kind of bringing people into therapy, or that's what they're distressed about. It's the binge eating. But when you start talking, there's also another aspect to the cycle, which is restriction or dieting. So people usually go between these phases of being quote unquote good or on the wagon, and then kind of having these moments where they fall off the wagon and they lose control over their eating, and they identify those times as really distressing. But it's usually really the restrictive aspect that's driving the binge eating episodes. And in many ways, I believe that binge eating is a kind of natural and normal response to restriction, because our bodies are designed to keep us alive. And when our body is being, starved, or emotionally we feel that we don't have access to food, it makes a lot of sense that there are these moments where we do allow ourselves to eat, and it kind of spirals and feels more out of control. So the diet binge cycle really stems from usually feeling not good about our bodies in some way. So that might be we don't like the way that our bodies look. We don't like, or it can also stem from health concerns. And I think this is something that's often not talked about as much, the way that health concerns that tend to be linked with like dietary changes can really trigger cycles of eating disorders and disordered eating. So, we typically start with the idea that we want to change our body in some way, either the way our body looks or the way our body functions, and that the way that we're going to do that is through what we're eating. So we start restricting what we're eating, saying we shouldn't have that food's not healthy, that food's not going to help me lose weight, and we start restricting our food intake. And I want to emphasize there's two different kinds of restriction. So a lot of people think, I'm not restricting because I'm eating all the foods. That's the problem. I'm eating too much. And restriction can be what I call objective restriction, so which is like actually the foods that we are or are not eating. It can also be subjective restriction or mental restriction, which is the ideas that we have around food. That sense, I shouldn't eat that. That food is bad. If I have that food, I'm going to be out of control. So all of those things can be a restrictive element to the binge eating cycle. And then typically when we restrict our food, either mentally or objectively, we tend to experience increased cravings. And there's quite a bit of research about that, and I talk about that in my book. And those cravings become increasingly hard to fight against the longer that they go on and the longer that we restrict. So then usually people have moments where they allow themselves to eat something, or they start feeling more out of control, and it can lead to a binge episode. And then after the binge, oftentimes people do experience that guilt, shame, kind of the negative feelings around the binge. And the way that we cope with that is to say, well, I'll be better tomorrow. I'm going to go back onto my diet. I won't do this again, right? So many of us know that feeling. And the cycle continues on and on and on. So one thing that I think we've been really kind of misled by a lot of the common narrative around dieting and health is the idea that health, that restriction is, healthy, and that, binge eating is the problem, and that if we're staying on the diet, then we have, high motivation and good willpower. And if we're off the diet, off the wagon, then we're weak or, undisciplined, unmotivated. And there's a lot of moral judgments you'll hear that go into all of this. And, in actuality, it's the restriction and the dieting that's making us feel so out of control around food. But a lot of people don't see it that way, because that's kind of not the narrative that our culture tells us. And when we talk about our culture, I want to talk briefly, just introduce the idea of diet culture, which is the culture that we all live in. And diet culture is the idea that It's a system of beliefs that equates thinness and weight loss with health, moral value, desirability, and superiority. So we think that if we eat in a way that's disciplined, if we you hear it even in the judgments around I was good today or I was bad today, right? We hear that like moral value that gets played in with the eating. And we do start to believe that based on our eating, it defines who we are. I'm good or I'm bad, and that's where we see so much shame that comes up around especially binge eating. So diet culture teaches us that our values and what we look like and how much we're able to conform to that impossible beauty ideal that society puts forth. And I have a feeling I'm going over my 10 to 15 minutes, but I will say, you're good. I'm good? Okay. I'll say briefly, so then what do we do, right? That's the big question. And that's where I find mindful eating, and I'm really excited to be here with the Mindful Eating Project, can help us unlearn diet culture and help us heal from these disordered patterns that so many of us find ourselves in. So mindful eating, just so we're all on the same page, I'll define quickly, is the process of being completely aware and present in your body and in your relationship with food. So using all of your senses to observe the eating experience and also our body. So tuning into things like hunger, fullness, satiation, the taste of food, how our body feels when we eat different foods. And that's something that often people think, well, if I'm not dieting or if I'm just doing mindful eating, I'm going to be unhealthy. And it's really, that's not the case at all, because in mindful eating, we're actually tuning into our body, which is the greatest source of wisdom to guide us in our individual health. So mindful eating is really about trusting our body, which again is very hard to do in the context of diet culture. And it is, people often say, is mindful eating just eating whatever I want? How can I do that? I can't do that. That's bad. And I always say mindful eating is about eating what you want, but it's about truly discerning what you want. So usually when people say, well, I'm just eating whatever I want, are they actually eating whatever they want? Oftentimes they're eating whatever diet culture tells us not to eat, right? It's that rebelliousness that comes on. But mindful eating is really about truly tuning into your body and using that knowledge to guide your eating. And it can provide a structure of how mindful eating, especially the way that I teach it, which is a little bit more structured, can provide that structure that I think a lot of people need, because it can feel really overwhelming to say, well, I'm gonna let go of all these food rules and then what, right? So I do think we need structure. So goals of mindful eating is to eat in a way that feels good, and then move on with your life. Like for food to not feel so all-consuming. Food can still be enjoyable. It should be enjoyable, I believe. I love food. It can be a source of pleasure, but it doesn't have to take up so much of the space in our lives.
I work very closely with many women, even men, who struggle with eating disorders, body image, and it really became a passion for me to help people heal. Alexis went over, or Dr. I'm sorry. Okay, you seem like a doctor. Went over the definitions very clearly, and many of that I was planning on talking about. So I really feel that I have a lot of analogies that we can go over that can help you maybe think of the way that you're treating your body and think of it the next time you want to restrict, and maybe think of it and say, do I really want to do that? Who here has gone on a diet before? Right? When you're on a diet, you feel hungry, right? And people tell me I'm supposed to be hungry. Who here has not honored their hunger when they're on a diet? Right? Push through, push through. You're hungry, it doesn't matter, right? So when you're ignoring that hunger, it's like holding your breath, right? How long can you hold your breath for? Right? You're holding your breath. Eventually, you're going to have to grasp for air, right? What is the word in diet? Die, right? So eventually the diet has to die. It has to end. If it's a diet that is so restrictive, that's why the binge happens. Exactly like she said, we wind up, the binge is the body's defense mechanism actually to save you. So that binge restrictive cycle is actually trying to help you. And that cycle, when you're starving, you're not feeling well. When you're binging, you're not feeling well. And it really does play with your metabolism. And people really, right, we all want to have a fast metabolism. What's your metabolism? It's like the engine of a car. If you had to choose a car, we're going to choose a slow car. But when you're going on these diets, you're slowing down your engine. And when you're dieting, it's like not having enough fuel, right? And you're just, I'm going to make it. You're testing how far the car can go without gas. Eventually, what happens? You stall. Would you, how long and how much risk do you take until your car breaks down? That's what you're doing to your body when you're on the restriction. Same thing if you have like a beach ball. Like if you're trying to push down a beach ball in the ocean, right? And you're trying to hold it down. Eventually it's gonna pop up. So you're trying to go against nature when you're dieting. And that's why people wind up binging. Most people who come to me and they're looking to diet, I was doing great until I binged, right? Because they're looking at that binge as something so terrible. And it's so terrible feeling in the moment because you feel gross after the binge. And then the next day, like she said, you're like, oh, I need to diet again. And you feel gross on both parts. You're in that cycle because you're losing your hunger cues. And you can't listen to your leptin and your ghrelin, the hunger cues that wind up telling you, like when you were a child, when you're hungry, when you're full. So after today, I want you all to start to honor your hunger, but respect your fullness. And it's easier said than done. So right, who here has overeaten? Right? We all have overeaten, not been so happy with a meal, right? But what happens is, many people, after they overeaten, they say, oh my God, I ruined the day. Who here has said, I ruined the day, I'm going to start on Monday? Right? That's it. We might as well enjoy the rest of the weekend. I'm going to eat everything until Monday because I'm never going to eat those things again. Right? So I'm going to get everything in that I love because starting Monday, done. All those bad foods that she said, right? Because we label, who here thinks cake is bad? Right? Because you think that for the rest of your life, you're not going to eat the cake or you're not going to eat your favorite food. Who here could live without any piece of their favorite food until, God willing, 120? So why are you trying to do it? Because you're trying to do what is the impossible. I'm not telling you to start your day off with it. I'm not telling you to eat it in bulk and eat it to the point that makes you feel gross. She had a great point. You need to figure out what makes you feel good. Intuitive eating is eating what you want with a but. You need to figure out what makes you feel good. And just because it makes someone else feel good doesn't mean that's what makes you feel good. Everyone needs what's tailored right for them. Not what's on a paper, not what's specifically written for someone else. It's what makes you feel good. Doesn't matter if it's healthy, doesn't matter if you think it's bad or good. It's what makes you feel good. Does it make you feel energetic? Are you keeping your blood sugar stable throughout the day, or are you not eating all day and setting yourself up for that binge? Because when you're not eating all day, that's that same thing of holding your breath all day long until finally dinner comes. And then there's no control. And every day you say, but I'm going to have control. Right? And then your favorite food is there, and then there's zero control. It's like opening up Pandora's box. Who here has gone to a wedding thinking, I love the shoes. When I bought them, I thought they were comfortable. Right? And then whoever you're with, you're like, oh my God, I can't. How much longer can you last in the shoes? Who here has taken the shoes off? Right? Who here has done it? I usually hold out till the car. I'll be honest. I leave the slippers in the car. But that's that same type of feeling. That's that food restriction. Or who here has to go to the bathroom and holds it in all day? Eventually, you need to use the bathroom. Right? These are all types of examples and analogies of the same type of things that you're doing to your body that eventually that has to burst. So if you think of these type of examples and stop looking for perfection and start to look for consistency. My kids always make fun of me because of that last video, I'm not sure who. Balance, consistency. I'm not a camera person. Everyone's asking me to do these videos. I never lived that last one down, but because I just sent it and I did it quick. I'm like, I'm just going to do it. But consistency and balance, it's not perfection. And that, so when I said it, I'm just laughing because if they see this, I won't live that one down either. But balance and consistency is what gets you to feel good with your mind and your body. And stop comparing. Look, everyone here is different, true? Different age, different bodies, hair color, shoe size, everything. And that's the biggest thief of joy. You're never going to have the person's legs. You're never going to have their hair color. You're never going to have what the other person has in everything in their life. So look at yourself and not at the next person. And that can help you eat better as well. Because when you're striving for perfection or excellence, you're not going to get there because it's impossible. I don't eat perfect, and I don't claim to. When my clients come in the first time they meet me, they're like, oh, you probably just eat fruits and vegetables. Yeah. I used to back in the day because that's how I believed that was what was healthy. And that led me into a dark place. But getting in eating in balanced way, in making sure not to cut out your favorite foods is what will keep your mind and your body happy and healthy. So, I could give you a couple more examples, like similar to the holding breath. But I think that the way that you talk to yourself in your head is the biggest problem that I see with most people. And I want you to really think about this, and I'm sure you've heard it so many times, and it's easier said than done. But how are you talking to yourself in your head? I still work on it till today. Would you ever say the things that you say to yourself in your head, to your friend, to your sister, to anyone? How is your negative talk? How is your talk? Make it better. Think about how, if anyone heard the things you say to yourself out loud, would you say it? Start with one thing a day. It's much easier said than done. So when you hear yourself saying a negative thing, counteract it with something positive. If you're not ready for it to be about your physical, the most important thing, like she said, it's from the inner part. Binging is not about the food. Something is bothering you emotionally. And we just want to numb the pain or the emotional stress that's bothering you. either numbing it or trying to ignore it. And it's harder to face it. But when you face it, that's when you can live in peace with your food and your body, your mind, and your life. And it's a much, much happier life. And the people around you will see the difference in your confidence. And like she said, the food should not be the center. We celebrate with food. It's never going away. Like it said in the letter, it's liberating.
And now we're going to open up the audience to questions and answers for Laura and for Alexis.
Thank you for speaking and for all your intellect, for sharing everything you've learned and for your experience. I think that we all really can relate. That's why we're in this room. And I think that there's a lot of people that are going to watch this video or watching it live and that they really relate. And also just thank you to my mom and Adele and everyone on the committee, because this is a long time coming. And I think a lot of people in this room who have been through this for a really long time can attest that this has been a long time coming and we really need to address it. So my question is, what can we do and how can we address this if we've been doing this for so long? If we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, and this is just the way we live, this is the way we think about ourselves, and this is the way we think about food, and it's debilitating, but this is the way we live, and it's kind of become who we are. So how do we kind of break that and break it generationally so that we're not just passing this down as our community is so, has such a hard time with this. So what is your advice on how to stop the process?
I think the talk in the home is a very big deal, and watch what you say in front of your children. It's not just, oh, you're beautiful, but mommy, it's just mommy's on a diet. It's making sure about complimenting your children on their characteristics, not just their looks, and being careful what you say, or not even just around them. It's about like not even just complimenting, like talking about other people. Did you see that one lost weight, or did you see that one gained weight? It's a lot of talk about people's images and about the dieting culture is definitely influences children from 2 years old and up, and be the right role model of how you eat. And because kids copy everything you do, not just what you say.
I agree with that. I think that one of the most powerful things we can do both for ourselves and for our children is to acknowledge that we have an issue that we need to address, and to do that healing work with ourselves. I think a lot of parents say, how do I prevent this? The struggles with my child, how do I help my child have a healthy relationship with food? And I say, if you have a healthy relationship with food, it inherently will get trickled down to your kids. And I completely agree in terms of kids, just hear everything that's around them. And I grew up in a home where my mom was a chronic dieter. She really didn't comment on my body very much. Her mother had been incredibly critical of her body and just about everything else. And, she wanted to do things differently, right? So she really set out to break what she felt was breaking a cycle. And, parents, we all do the best that we can. But in doing that, she never commented on my body, but I heard and saw the way that she talked about her own body, incessantly critical, always trying to lose weight, a lot of shame around food. And I got the message loud and clear that the way to be is to be thin, and that if you're not thin, that's bad, and that's something that you have to change. And I went on my first diet when I was 8 years old because I thought that's just what women do. That's how I could identify kind of with my mom. So, I really think that healing for ourselves is incredibly powerful in breaking the intergenerational cycles. I'm a mom. That's what motivates me to do a lot of this work. My book is dedicated to my two daughters. And, I think that believing that healing is possible is the first step, because so many people, say, well, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been doing this for 40 years. This is just the way that my life is. And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And I've worked with people in their 50s, 60s, 70s who have been doing this, since they were in, teens. And I've seen people make changes, and it's really an incredible process. And yeah, the freedom that comes with not living your life with so much energy around food and, hating your body. Yeah, I would say seeking help. I think a lot of us believe we have to do it alone. What the Mindful Eating Project is offering is an incredible resource. I can't tell you how many people call my office, they want to access treatment and they aren't able to do it. And to have a pipeline here where they're helping make treatment more accessible, that is such a huge gift for this community. So, you have this resource, use it. And if you feel like you're struggling, you don't have to do it alone. And I think that so many of us believe there's like a virtue to getting through it on our own. We have to do everything the hard way. And it is really hard to do this, especially if it's been entrenched for many years without professional support. And I think that working with a therapist and dietitian is a really key part of the healing process, both for you and your family.
What would you answer? My daughter was not so, I don't think she has any issues yet, God willing she won't, but she said something like, I think I'm eating just because I'm bored. So my husband and I were like, not a good reason to eat, like go do something else. But like, what would you say to a kid that starting to pay attention and realizing, but they don't really know what's going on?
And I would address this, obviously depending on how old the child is, but I would, kind of say the philosophy I feel is similar for children and adults in terms of, I would say great job on like recognizing that, and what a powerful like awareness that they had to be able to say, I'm eating because I'm hungry. And I would be curious about their experience. How does it feel to eat when you're bored? How does that help you, not feel bored? Is that what you want to do? Here's some other, if you're bored, we could also, do you want to play a game? Do you want to go out and take a walk? Do you want to, maybe schedule a play date with a friend, or do you want to eat? Like, what feels like the best choice? And I think that a lot of the work around emotional eating is about, we tend to really demonize emotional eating and say we should never eat emotionally ever, right? And again, that's not realistic, and it brings in the restriction. So the more that we say we shouldn't do that, we should never eat emotionally, the more that we get into that all or none cycle. And when we do, we feel like a failure, that, and it sets the whole cycle in motion. So to me, food should be one option to cope with emotions, but we want to build up other tools as well. So I would kind of approach it similarly with kids. Yeah.
Binging can start as an effect of boredom or other emotions without having had restriction first, correct?
Yes, binge eating can start for different reasons, but what I see most commonly, and I'm curious if this is your observation as well, is there's almost always a restrictive aspect. A lot of people don't identify it as restriction because they feel, I'm just eating everything. My problem is that I can't restrict. My problem is that, I'm feeling out of control with food because, like you said.
Or it could even be like vitamin deficiency, or like if you're thinking about a child, like it could be that they're just missing something, and they sometimes they go from salty to sweet because they're missing some nutrients.
But I think the emotional restriction, the emotional restriction as well, in that sense that I can't have this, I shouldn't have this, that really can set off the cycle. But most people come
I'm
in.
talking about physiologically and psychologically as well.
Right, yeah. But most people come in saying, how can you help me with these periods that I'm feeling out of control? I need to figure out how to be good all the time, right? So most people don't identify the restrictive cycle. So I do think it's usually there, but yeah, different emotions. There's different reasons that people can set off.
I just want to go back to Colette's story when she was emphasizing how she was on a good roll. She was exercising 3 to 4 times a week, 30 minutes.
But the compliments and the way and the emphasis we all put on the outer beauty or so skinny, Anna, your bones, our vocabulary is so important, and how we address the people that we love around us. What we say to them means so much. So we really have to be very careful with that.
That's a very, very good point. The comments can set people back in so many negative ways. Even people who are suffering from an illness can get so many compliments on their weight when they're sick.
And that can
There's
trigger an eating.
Exactly. There's so many other compliments to give people. I'm not saying don't tell someone they look good, but it doesn't have to be that, oh wow, you lost weight. Say they look good. Say they like their shirt. Say you like their hair. Say they look pretty. It doesn't have to be, wow, you lost so much weight.
It's not really related to binge eating, but is that okay? How would you recommend a parent, let's say, respond to a child who, let's say, is heavier or doesn't feel good about their body and wants to lose weight in a healthy manner without causing them to have an unhealthy relationship with food? For example, let's say they eat sour sticks every day. They're in 9th grade or 7th grade, and you're like, you want to help them because you want them to have a healthy relationship with food, but you also don't want to ever have them restrict or feel like they need to restrict in the long run. So how would you recommend responding to something like that?
So it's really about, again, teaching them the balance and teaching them, it's also, you can teach them to have those things not at their hungriest time, because anyone knows when you're starting to have, let's say, sour sticks or something that's really sugary or at a hungry time, it's impossible to have a small amount. So you can give them tips by leading by example, like maybe right after dinner when they're already satisfied. And that can also help them metabolize it better as well. And and buying things in individual packages in the house also can teach them a little bit more portion control. But at the same time, when they wind up having 2 packages, you're not making a big deal. Like, oh, I do that sometimes also, it's normal, because we don't follow a package, oh, that's what makes us full. So there has to be flexibility in the home, but it can help them know and start to listen to not getting rid of all their favorite stuff, but having that little bit of balance.
From a psychological perspective, I would definitely start from a place of curiosity around why do they want to lose weight? What doesn't feel good in their body? Are they being teased at school? Are they being bullied?
And under 18, I would for sure start with, if it's under 18, usually you start with that, right?
And and educating around diet culture, like helping them understand the problem isn't their body, it's the culture that we live in. And yeah, it's, it's a balance of validating that it can feel hard to be, the chubby kid, or to certainly being bullied and teased can be an incredibly traumatic experience for kids. We have, we know the impact that makes on even into adulthood. Can't tell you how many adults cry in my office about, being bullied and teased. But how do we balance the validation that they're feeling uncomfortable in their body without also colluding with diet culture to say, yes, the solution is to change your body or to lose weight? So I would start with what feels distressing to them and kind of go from there. If they're struggling with body image, again, maybe working with a therapist to help build up body image there's some great books on intuitive eating for with kids and body image in kids, but doing things to help them build up a positive body image. Certainly I think a lot starts with how we think about bodies at home. So the things we talked about early on, not commenting on other people's bodies, or, even just gently bringing in stories, depending on age, but stories with characters with diverse body sizes, doing different things where the focus isn't on their body or weight, but just, they have some great young adult books where it's just a protagonist in a larger body living their life and, seeing people, there's such a lack of representation of people in larger bodies in the media, especially that aren't
the funny friend or the evil villain or things like that. So just bringing in positive representation. So, I guess I would really be focusing on body image and what's causing them to want to lose weight. And then if there are things that feel problematic in their relationship with food, like if they're binge eating or things like that, addressing that in terms of the relationship with food, I wouldn't personally do it through like a weight loss lab.
No, 100. I just want to make myself clear because I get the phone call at least a couple of times a week of a parent calling and asking to make an appointment for a young child. And sometimes let's say I can schedule an appointment through a text. When it comes to a child, I never make an appointment for a child through text. Usually anything under 18, I speak to the parent first and I say, most of the time, I say, I prefer the child not to come in and you come in. And let me educate you. Maybe you just want to prepare a little bit differently, not even tell the child that you came in. That's up to you. You know your child better if you want to say that you received an education, but normally it's probably just about changing some of the products in your house without swiping the house totally. And I give them that education of what to say, what not to say, and give the parents the education, and that usually winds up working out.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of...
Usually, that's...
Yeah, when we do the same, I think there's a lot of work that can be done with parents without even having to bring the kids in. Yeah, especially for younger kids. And there's a lot of things that we can do, in our home, like intuitive eating or mindful eating doesn't mean, sometimes people think it means that we have to buy everything our kid wants, or when they go to the grocery store and they're like, I want this and this and this. That happens with my kids. I'm like, no, that's not on our list. We don't need that this week. Maybe we can try that another time. Yeah, or sometimes I do buy those things, and wouldn't that be fun? But
it's teaching them. It's teaching them just like you teach, if you... Yeah.
And a lot of it is, we do have, again, depending on the age, when you get to be teens and they have more control over what they're eating, it's different. But for younger kids, we kind of can set the tone in the environment as well. But, from a psychological perspective, definitely focusing on the body image piece.
Right, I agree.
What do you suggest about keeping the foods that you like in the house? Like some people say don't buy it. Some people say keep it in the house. What do you suggest?
I never suggest just getting rid of, all the foods. I treat every single person on an individual based. I never tell two people the same thing, but like I was saying, when you really, really swipe all your favorite foods out of your life, you usually bust. So it's about figuring out, usually, sometimes you just need those guidelines of how to fit it in and where to fit it in. Like I was saying, maybe not at your hungriest time, or figuring out where and when and how you'll feel your best to have it.
Yeah, I agree. And if you read my book, you'll see that I do talk about in there the idea of keeping these kind of fear foods or the binge foods in the house and keeping them in abundance so that you always have it. So it doesn't feel like, oh, I have 1 pint of ice cream and I'm not, a lot of people they'll bring it in. They'll say, I have this pint of ice cream and I'm allowed to have it, but really I can just have a, teaspoon of it and I'm going to make it last for 2 weeks. No, get a bunch of it and then, keep it replenished so that as you're eating it, you have that security that it's there. But it's a complicated question and probably gets more, more in depth than we have time for today. But if you notice in my book, it's towards the end of the book. So it can feel really overwhelming for people to bring those foods into their home in abundance, especially if they're in the beginning of their journey and still kind of feeling the diet mentality and still feeling like they don't trust themselves around food. So this is where I would never recommend, someone if someone was seeing me for therapy, I would never say on the second session, okay, now buy all the foods. It's individualized, and it's probably you want to build up some of the skills so that you can, work with it in a way that feels more meaningful than feeling out of control. But it is addressed in my book if you want a more in-depth answer.
And just because we spoke for this hour doesn't mean that you're all going to go out and everything's going to be great today and tomorrow. And that's, I'm sure, it's a journey. And if you're struggling, you have to know that time to heal, it's a journey. And a friend, like you want to make the food your friendship. And when you're developing a friendship, it takes time. And instead of the food to be your enemy, you want it to be your friend. And time and patience to be able to get there.
Hi, I'm much older, so I have a different kind of husband. Basically, I don't have faith at our age. I'm always dieting and dieting. So do you recommend first to go through therapy, then a nutritionist, or it's like so complicated when you're doing it for so long? It's not improved by it's not getting results actually, and so how do you do that?
I would say the best standard of care is to do both if you can.
Because it's a circle of support. It's a circle of support to be able to.
I typically work hand in hand with dietitians. So usually if someone's coming in and they're struggling and they don't have a dietitian, we do get them set up with a dietitian and same. So like a treatment team is really at minimum a dietitian and a therapist. And then sometimes depending on what's going on, we have a physician.
You can't tell someone like me into it, whatever.
Well, and I think that's why structure is important. Like dieting gives us the structure, right? So some people said, look at my book and they say, oh, a 10-step plan, that feels like another diet. That's intentional that there's structure built in because I think it can feel very scary to move away from dieting.
I think it's the fun.
Right. So, there are steps, whether you're, looking at my book or like working with a therapist, it's exactly like you said, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But I do recommend, working with both.
First therapy and then nutrition together.
At the same time, if you can. Yeah, that's what's usually recommended. And then usually the therapist and the dietitian will speak and we'll kind of all work together.
It becomes your support system.
You touched upon the psychological component of all of this. So for people who are looking to help themselves or others make that jump from trying to help themselves through it to going to therapy, what advice do you have to offer? I know starting therapy can be a hard process for a lot of people.
Yeah, so I think just normalizing going to therapy is, first of all, like I go to therapy, a lot of,
It's a present. It's really.
Yeah, it's nothing to be ashamed about. And I think that there can be a lot of stigma around therapy. People think like, oh, you don't go to therapy unless you're like at rock bottom, unless you're really struggling. But therapy really can be helpful for, I'm biased, but I believe everyone can benefit from therapy. So, I think just like normalizing the experience, helping, if it's a friend, like helping with access. Again, like we have a great resource here with the Mindful Eating Project. Like so much of the barrier is like just finding a therapist, and people say they call 20 people, especially if they need to use their insurance or things like that. Like it can be really overwhelming and people get discouraged and they say like, oh, just forget about it, it's not that important. But so use this resource. I would, sharing that information I think is a huge step.
Also a huge step is just the awareness that you need help. To say, and everybody needs help in one way or another in their life. So awareness is the first step to recovery in any, stage of your life. So in closing, I just want to thank Alexis, Paulette, and Laura for coming. And then to bring, and also we have an incredible committee who helped bring this event to life. Lorraine Shahabar, Adele Jamal, Bonnie Towell, Odette Franco, and Eileen Ashkenazi. Thank you. And behind the scenes, we also have Safe and Mindful Eating Project staff, Ulsan, Liat Dahan, and Larissa. Thank you so much for coming. And really we should be very proud of ourselves as a community, as women, and really share the wealth. Tell everybody about mindful eating and help each other, and we're here for you. And again, awareness is the first step to healing.